Greetings, everybody, and thank you for attending the Baltimore Rotterdam Designing Cities webinar series. To begin with, to receive credits for attending this program, please check the links in the chat that will be shared with you shortly and fill out your AIA CEU form. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Cristina Murphy, Assistant Professor at the School of Architecture and Planning at Morgan and Adjunct Professor at WAC, Virginia Tech. Today, Matteo Bettoni will moderate the talk, which will follow Paul Riley and Utku Akbulut and Duzan Doepel presentation. Last week, we learned from courageous, brave, humble, beautiful people who are aiming at making the world a better place, starting from the design of a house to the active participation in their communities and the promotion of place and its citizens. Both our guests are active in their immediate surroundings and told us that if you think that we have not done anything, then it means that we have done our work well. Both our guests use their place to produce and to open up the space to the community, turning new structures into creative hubs. Certainly, their work is focused around the human and the home and the community. We had very determined women last week that knew what meant to give back to the world, able to focus their attention to the individual and the environment all around them. We also learned that to make a successful project, we need to sleep and to be able to manage our time. From February to April, we will present 9 lectures featuring dynamic discussions among the cities of Rotterdam and Baltimore. Specifically, we will hear how design and policy can improve the built environment and provide access to all. Each week, 2 designers will discuss design topics from a social, spatial, and architectural point of view, and how to make spaces accessible to all. Through conversations, we will explore if and how the environment is determinant to the failure or success of projects and what that means for the city, the citizens, and the well-being. All of you are welcome to participate to this conversation. Just drop your questions in the question and answer box, which is located at the bottom of your screen, and participate. We will be trying to get to them as soon as possible. So this afternoon and this evening, Matteo Bettoni is going to moderate this talk. Matteo is an Italian architect with 18 years of experience built by working in international renewed firm in Milano, in Rotterdam, and in Shanghai. He's a licensed architect since 2006, and he supports his creative attitude with a technical background and advanced software skills. With a history of successful experiences across nationalities and cultures, his projects received awards and recognitions, including 2 Europan, congratulations, and Under 40 Architects Awards. Matteo is also an athlete, and I know that, and he's getting ready for his first, I believe, triathlon. All due respect, Matteo, thank you very much for being with us, and please take the lead.
Well, thank you very much, Cristina, for the introduction and for mentioning my incoming challenges. That's true. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity of being part of this wonderful series of conversation. Actually, I like to see them really as a dialogue, and I invite the attendees to pose their question that I will address to the speakers today. I will start by introducing the speakers of today on the side of Marshall Craft Associates. So I have 2 principals, Paul Riley and Utku Akbulut. Paul Riley is originally from South Dakota and was raised on the Space Coast of Florida. He was exposed to design and construction through his father's work with the space program, which inspired his curiosity to analyze and explore how design can influence our communities. He has practiced from Florida to Aspen, Colorado, DC, and has spent much of his career in Baltimore, Maryland. He has worked on a wide range of project types, including commercial, institutional, cultural, and residential. Paul has developed a design reputation for keeping things simple and logical while creating unique projects that express his client's goal and aspiration while embracing the community. He believes that every project is an opportunity to express the client's unique identity by distilling the client's objective and program to develop a clear concept to tell the client's story. His design philosophy is rooted in developing a sense of place by taking advantage of each community's unique and often hidden or ignored attributes by finding beauty where one might least expect it. Through the use of synthesized, palette, and tactile materials and found objects, he tries to achieve a project that enhances the user's sensory experience while being sustainable, responsible. The second principle that we speak today from Marshall Craft is Utku Akbulut. He grew up in Istanbul, Turkey, and his fascination with architecture dates back to his childhood years when he was watching his father that as a contractor turned blueprints into building. Starting his architectural career as a draftsperson, Utku worked on a large-scale residential project in various capacities before moving to the United States. Over the last 17 years, Utku has channeled his efforts primarily into academic and healthcare projects, where his responsibilities range from master planning to the design, construction documents, and construction administration of buildings. Utku is a leader in computer-aided design and digital graphic imaging, committed to finding ways to engage clients more fully in the design process. Utku embraces the notion that close collaboration and good communication between the architect and the client leads to innovative design solutions. A talented designer with over 30 years of experience, Utku maintains the belief that a successful design relies not only on a strong understanding and response to the client needs, but also delivery of spaces that exceed expectation and create environments where humans can thrive. Personal note, which also has been said about me that I'm an athlete, I learned that Utku is a football fan and also has been practicing a lot when he was back in Turkey. I conclude with the biography of Duzan Doepel from DoepelStrijkers, studio based in Rotterdam, where I'm also talking from. Dusan was born and raised in Johannesburg, South Africa. An extreme climate, resource, water scarcity, and poverty make circular and inclusive design approach in this context a necessity. It was during his student years that he developed a fascination for climate and resource-efficient design. He brought this circular and inclusive design approach with him to the Netherlands when he emigrated in 1996 to work for RAvB Architects in Rotterdam. It was here that he worked with interior architect Helene Strijkers through the late 90s, not actually knowing that they would start an office together in 2007. DoepelStrijkers is an interdisciplinary design studio focusing on interior, architecture, and strategic urban intervention. Their radical local design approach leads to tailor-made solutions on different scales in which their circular and inclusive design agenda is explored. That was it from my side. I invite now Paul and Utku to turn their camera on and to introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Very pleased to be here and representing Marshall Craft Associates. I'm Paul Riley, and with me is Utku Akbulut, also a principal with Marshall Craft Associates, and we're here today to share the stage on behalf of Marshall Craft because it's one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on as a collaborative approach to everything that we do. Thank you very much, Cristina Murphy, for having us and inviting us to present on this seminar series, and we're very happy to be here. Matteo, thank you for the very nice introductions, and we cannot wait to hear what Dusan has to share with us later today. A little bit to start off, we wanted to give a little bit of background on the city of Baltimore and the comparison between Baltimore and Rotterdam. Both are modern cities, basically have had major changes over the history of their cities based on the destruction that happened during World War II in Rotterdam and the Great Fire that happened in the city of Baltimore, where both city centers were basically destroyed. In 1904, the city of Baltimore was destroyed by a fire, which is one of the largest destructive occurrences that happened in most cities in the US. I think it's rated as the third worst disaster in city history in the US. And Rotterdam was basically bombed out in World War II, and both then had both of their city centers rebuilt as a result. Rotterdam had the pleasure of having most of their downtown rebuilt and attracted many modern architects, so it became a showcase for modern architecture. Both Rotterdam and Baltimore both have about the same geographical and population size. They both share a deep time maritime history with large ports. They both have prestigious universities, medical schools, museums, tech startups, and most importantly, both have very diverse populations, which will be part of the topic of what we're talking about today in our feature project that we're going to showcase. So Marshall Craft was founded in 1986 by Michael Craft and Buck Marshall. And we are an architectural planning and interior design firm, and we are based in the historic Clipper Arts building in Baltimore. We also have an office in Richmond and in York, Pennsylvania. We are driven by one radical mission. We call it do the right thing. And the right thing varies greatly between each of our clients and each project. Finding just the right thing requires committing to no shortcuts search for the appropriate balance between many needs, aspirations, and limitations that define each challenge. In the photos, you can see where we are located. We're in the Clipper Mill building, in the assembly building, which you can see in the lower left was a picture from the 1800s, early 1900s, where they used to assemble. It was the largest manufacturing machine shop in the East Coast, and they manufactured water wheels. We developed the, not we did, but they did, develop the capitals for the US Capitol. And in the middle picture, you can see how it looks today as it's been redeveloped. And on the right is a picture of our office. So do the right thing to us means design excellence, responsiveness, accuracy, efficiency, collaboration. And collaboration is the key word for us that we all really focus on how we work together here. And it's a celebration of different viewpoints, ideas, and backgrounds. These are what drives us. And the background portion is really critical in our mission at Marshall Craft because we have people from all over the world that work here and participate in what we do. And it's all those different viewpoints that really creates what we work on. Our work is primarily focused on owner-occupied institutional clients. So we focus on culture and civic as one of our sectors, then higher education and pre-K-12 education. We also do historic adaptive reuse, federal government, private enterprise, science and research, and healthcare. Wanted to give you kind of an overview of some of the work that we do, but not spend time on these. This is just to give you kind of a feel for the work that we do. This project is in Baltimore City, and it's for the Maryland School for the Blind. And then we have some higher ed projects, both here at Cecil College and Chesapeake College. And then in our cultural civic sector, we also have done several projects in the city of Baltimore, being the West Wing of the Baltimore Museum of Art, Walter's Art Gallery, and currently under construction is the National Museum of Women's in the Arts in DC, which is currently under construction, and it's kind of a showcase for the Women's Month right now. And we're trying to, put a lot of attention there. Also, one of our projects that we work on, one of our sectors, is high-tech and government work. This is a particular project down in DC, which is a high-tech lab, but we can't say much more about that. We also do historical and adaptive reuse. A couple of the projects that we've worked on is the U.S. Naval Academy, Chapel Restoration on the left, and then Dunbarton Oaks, which is part of Harvard University in Georgetown. And you can see there's various styles here from the old historic main house at the top right, which is a renovation of the gallery space. And then on the lower right is a Philip Johnson building, the pre-Columbian pavilion, which we are in the process of doing renovation again, and we did renovation on that a few years ago. So the focus of what we want to talk to today focuses on our healthcare sector work. And one of the primary problems that every place in the world and every place in the United States is having is very focused on mental and behavioral health illness. 1 in 5 US adults experience mental illness. 781,000 adults in Maryland have mental illnesses. 181,000 adults in Maryland have serious mental health conditions, and 252,000 adults in Maryland did not receive the needed mental health services. Difficulty with assessing care, cost of care, lack of mental health professionals, inadequate and location facilities are key parts of what we want to talk about and focus on our project that we're going to talk about today. We were involved with the Maryland Department of Health to create the 20-year plan, the master plan moving forward. The plan that we worked on will enable Maryland to progressively transform system-wide healthcare delivery, improve health and quality of care, and reduce costs. So this was a multi-year process that we went through with the state of Maryland to develop this plan. We worked with many different people. We engaged with stakeholder engagement. We worked with a wide group of Maryland Department of Health leaders, medical and clinical staff, strategy and medical planners, and community and healthcare organizations. The approach was to analyze the programs and services that exist today and what was needed, analyze the existing facilities and what they needed, and look at alternative development scenarios. Out of this study came the recommendations for new capital projects, divestiture of non-operating facilities, ongoing maintenance, savings for partnering, community, and future care model. So the future care model is what we're going to be talking about focused here today. Part of what Cristina asked us to do is to take a project from its beginning and to its end and see how it affected, how the design process affected how we approached the project, and then how the project's turned out. So in this Department of Health study, the future care model talked about the right care at the right place at the right time. So the future care model outcomes were to provide immediate treatment to acute behavioral health episodes, reduce patients at emergency departments, prevent inpatient admissions, bring care closer to where patients reside, reduce the stigma of seeking mental health services, and reduce inpatient behavioral health services through early support and patient care. Preventive service reduces admissions to hospitals. It reduces the readmission to these hospitals and provides social support and comfort. Also intervenes with acute episodes. So the key factor that we're trying to work with is how our projects that we're working on affects the community as a whole for the state and then the local community specifically. So these projects that we're going to be talking about aren't as, quite as sexy as the earlier projects that we have to show, but it's a very mission-driven part of what we do here at Marshall-Craft, and it's really a part of the social needs for the state, for the community, and the community as a whole.
Oh, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Cristina and Matteo. So as Paul mentioned, the project that we wanted to talk about and sort of walk everybody through the whole design process, starting from the inception all the way through the realization of the project, is the Hartford Crisis Center. One of the reasons we've selected this project is that it was discussed as part of the master planning effort that Paul mentioned as a model for multiple reasons. And one of the reasons is to solve the behavioral health problem. It is really critical to create a public and private partnership. So this project had a group that came together starting from the Hartford County government with different offices, along with an Upper Chesapeake, University of Maryland, Upper Chesapeake Health, which is the second largest private client and employer in the Hartford County, to make this project happen and address a growing issue of growing need of healthcare facilities. So the site that they had selected also directly related to the mission of the crisis center and the problems associated with the inpatient programs. Usually accessibility is one of the biggest problems versus in the crisis centers. This is, it's easier to locate in a smaller communities, provide maintenance of the operations of the crisis centers are usually a lot more friendly from the cost point of view compared to the inpatient unit. So the particular site that was selected was a building in a strip mall that was originally designed as a bowling alley, then turned in partially to an office, which had the major parts of it underutilized. And the group selected the site, and then we've started the effort to turn this building into the crisis center. So the first effort that we have started which is very critical, to bring all the stakeholders on the table, from the clinicians to the pharmacists, to the facilities, to the the people who had previous behavioral health to really understand the program. So we've had 3 days long charrette to go through the entire patient and staff experience from the point the patient arrives to the facility all the way through the discharge, as well as the follow-up care after. We've created a spaghetti diagrams and whatnot to understand the issues and then ask what if questions, and everybody has given an opportunity to develop what they think it makes sense from the flow, which then we've sort of distilled into this easy to understand diagram that became a sort of the backbone of the design, and that it created an early buy-in from everyone within the process. And you find these kind of diagrams really, really helpful, especially if projects with tight schedules and tight budgets. It locks everybody into the idea, and going back and revisiting some of those are kind of eliminated along with other conflicts. So then we've taken that diagram and then overlaid the plan just to see what our options are to start to form the building, the design itself. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight in this particular sketch is the continuum of care. So the building included multiple program spaces, starting from the call center, which is basically served as a immediate response to who is in a behavioral health distress, to an urgent care to provide that temporary stabilization and intervention, to a more long-term residential crisis. And then it really didn't stop there, but then take it to the next level when the patients sort of are outside the exit and discharge the facility and still require follow-up cares. This facility provided that for those patients who are in transition to a full recovery. So that continuum of care, which is what you don't really, it's one of the problems with the current inpatient model, is being actually addressed here in a more diverse treatment settings. So from the programming, going more into a design a little bit, what we have tried to incorporate in this particular project was the biophilic design. We wanted to use the nature and natural elements to incorporate into the healing process. So it's not just the staff and the caregivers providing help, but the entire space contributes to the well-being and the healing process for the patient. So it was critical to select the right colors and right art pieces, and incorporate the daylight to the extent possible to the space, with as much as the existing facility allowed us. So we used some of those colors in there throughout the building, keep the calm environment, and again, through some artwork images along the wall and wherever it's appropriate. So in the more technical part, just to go over quickly, we had in this particular facility 8 patient bedrooms with support spaces spread around, from bathrooms to some serving kitchens. And the main place was this big, large, open, what we call the living space. And that's really a critical program element. And the idea is to basically bring the patient out and keep the patient to patient, patient to staff, and in some cases, patient to peer interaction as much as possible to speed up the healing process, rather than keeping them in a small bedroom environment. So that home-like environment was very crucial to the design of the space. The other critical element in terms of the healing, using the architecture as a healing element, is to sort of break the notion of the barrier between the staff and the patients that you would typically see in a nurse stations with glass and you're here, I'm there kind of approach. So in this particular project, we've created what we called a hub the staff hub, but there was no barriers. The patients go in there. And in fact, the furnishing of the space wasn't such that the staff is encouraged and almost required to spend more time with the patients in the seating groups or dining areas rather than in the staff hub. Beyond that, we've also had some technical requirements in a typical behavioral health that we had to follow, such as the risk that each space proposes to make sure that the facility is a safe facility for both patients and the staff. And we typically look at it in 5 different categories, risk categories. Like the first risk category is for spaces that patients are not allowed. It's mostly for the staff offices, break rooms, and that type of spaces, which which poses a minimal risk to a category 4 is like the patient bedrooms, where the patients spend great deal of time alone and unsupervised. So based on the category of each space category, we had to make sure the building materials, products, as well as the assemblies address that. For instance, the doors needed to have a ligature resistant hardware. The swing direction was really important to avoid patient barricading themselves. And from the HVAC point of view, we had to use fixtures that are ligature resistant, or either light fixtures or the plumbing fixtures. So those are sort of the technical aspect of the project that we had to keep in mind when we were designing the residential crisis center portion of it, which is on the left. And the urgent care side of it, which is in the green area, it's pretty much the same technical and the design, the biophilic design aspects also apply to this space as well. What we had in this case was the 18 patient observation alcoves and a private alcove, and some support spaces with centrally located staff area. And the goal here is to create for each of those open patient alcoves to create a single destination, as opposed to the current model of patient going from being admitted to being treated to a recovery. So the idea is the patient comes and sits in the patient alcove, and then the staff, pretty much the admission process and treatment and the recovery process all happens in a single location, and the patient is just discharged. And another aspect of the design was to not have your typical staff stations, but have the staff walking around all the time, engaging with the staff to create that close interaction in the space. So where is this facility today? Basically, we have finished this project around the June 2019, which is when it was open. And the first 6 months, the building actually served about 900 patients. And then the call center, within a 12 months, received about 5,000 calls from the community. So in that sense, it was a very successful project, which is the reason it sort of went back and became a really model for the an important model for the master plan that we have done. And I want to quickly talk about two quick projects. This is a project in the middle of Baltimore City. We're just on the boards. We are just starting to work on, and the idea is to create a 16-bed crisis center within the city, It is a 3-story, used to be a row house, and then another healthcare provider used it for a while. And now Shepherd Pratt is turning the entire 3-story into a crisis center, with the first floor being more support and group spaces, whereas the second and third floor is the bedrooms, patient bedrooms. The last project, quickly, as we've finished a year ago, is the Shepherd Pratt Opioid Clinic. Again, this is another example of a public-private partnership between Baltimore County and Shepherd Pratt to utilize the existing underutilized space to create a much needed opioid clinic for the patients. We were tasked to do this project, design and finish it in really 4.5 months. It was a quick project, and currently it is being used, and it's actually serving the community very heavily. So what are all these 3 projects have in common is what Paul was saying, is to sort of take the right care to where it's needed most and when it's needed most. And as architects, we all any type of project we do, we have some level of impact in the society and the community. But in personal touch, I enjoy very much doing a behavioral health projects such as these 3. They're not big, shiny projects, but they have that immediate sort of cause and effect to the community. And the case in point is that the Bel Air Crisis Center, Hartford County, that having 900 patients within 6 months, it was just, you can see the effect on the society and the community. It's an immediate impact. So I just think that it's a personal, really fulfillment for me when I see in such a small project having such a powerful impact on the community. Paul?
And this is our MCA team. There's about 40 of us currently working in our 3 different offices here in Baltimore and Richmond and York. As you can see from the group photo that we have here, we're group of people from very diverse backgrounds from multiple countries around the world and from multiple states here in the US. So we're part of the culture of Baltimore itself, which is basically a city made up of immigrants to start with. And we're happy to be part of this process and really appreciate it. And we would like to now turn it over to Dusan.
Thank you for that inspiring overview of your work. I'd quickly like to share my screen. Sorry, just a little technical. Probably you can all see my screen properly now. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this exchange of ideas. As Matteo introduced me, I'm South African born and bred. I studied in Johannesburg, and during my studies I was exposed to extreme poverty in the rural areas in the townships of Johannesburg, where extreme climate, resource scarcity, water scarcity, and poverty have an incredible impact on the quality of daily life of people. At the same time, there are many architects and vernacular architects who are inspired by nature-based solutions, the termite hill being my personal favorite. It's one of the most intelligent architectural works, if you ask me, where the termites keep the structure at a constant temperature using a very smart, intricate network of ventilation shafts. These principles of climate design, resource efficient design, and inclusive design have been the pillars of our practice in Rotterdam, and on different scales in different projects, we try to work using these principles to address some of the societal issues and challenges that we face in our cities. Perhaps the most explicit form is a project we're currently realizing in Floriade in Almere, the master plan of MVRDV, where we're creating a bio-based and circular pavilion based very much on the principles of the termite hill, but in a slightly modern jacket. Probably the most explicit example of these principles in our work at this moment. But we're a multidisciplinary office, and we work on a diversity of projects ranging from offices to retail projects, to housing projects, healthcare, and also museums and mixed use. So it's a very broad portfolio, but these principles are at the epicenter of each project as we approach it with our interdisciplinary team. Thank you for the great introduction about Rotterdam and Baltimore. That makes it easier for me. As you all know, Rotterdam is a very low-lying city in a very low-lying country. The Netherlands has incredible risk of flooding, and as we witnessed in the last couple of years, there have been incredible floods, especially in the southern part of the Netherlands. But if you zoom into a map of the Netherlands, then roughly 1/3 of the country is under sea level. And this means that architects and urban planners have to take into account how to deal with the climate, with the rain, increasing sea level levels, and the cities are being designed as urban sponges. So the Urbanista at the left bottom corner, a fantastic example of how they capture rainwater and hold it until the peak rainfall has passed. It's a very interesting notion of the city as a sponge. Rotterdam is roughly 600,000 people. And as you see from this graph, roughly 50% is foreign. So it's a very multicultural city. And as Paul mentioned in the introduction, one of the most defining characteristics of the city is that it was bombed in the Second World War. So only a number of buildings survived the bombing in the war, and the new city, the new inner city, was built using the principles of the modern architecture. But the biggest difference is if you overlay the two cities, the old city and the new city, is that the new city has a much bigger grain, and roughly 50% of the houses that it had in the pre-war situation. So in 2012, we were asked by the city to do a research project into how can we densify or double the number of houses in the inner city for the International Architectural Biennale, this was. So what we did was we identified 7 densification strategies, and we combined these with 7 greenification strategies, because if you densify, you need to add qualitative green to the city. And basically, we looked at these climate principles, circular principles, energy principles, and tried to come up with a number of strategies on different scales for how these could be implemented in the city. And working with TNO, which is one of the most prestigious research institutes in the Netherlands, we used urban strategy to model the city, the existing city, and then modeled it with these 20,000 extra houses and green strategies. And from this, they could actually take a baseline reading of the city, which is the 0 line. And the spider web in the middle shows how the city actually has an improved sustainability due to the increased number of housing and people, and also to the increased number of green in the city. So basically densifying and greenifying adds to the sustainability of the city, which is something we know. And this has been a document which is now 10 years old, which has helped fuel urban policy making on the municipal level in the city. One of the projects that fits perfectly into this category is a project called Parkside on an inner city urban block. It is actually an old ambulance garage that we transformed, and it faces into a private park. And on streetscape, it's a very boring kind of monotone street with a very introverted character. And what we did was we took this very close character, we opened up the back facade and introduced a dugout, making it possible to make a second story in the building. So the very closed interior leads into a dugout with a floating bar with three bedrooms, and to a very open space at the back of the house. So these kind of small scale interventions are something where there's a lot of potential in the city to add to the number of housing in the city center. The second example of greenification is the Climate Square, also in 2012. This is the Netherlands Architectural Institute. It currently has a new name, but one of the biggest problems this space has is the building is surrounded by a pond, but it's a very shallow pond. So in the summer, it heats up and it gets full of algae and it stinks. And you can see in the middle, there's a beautiful terrace, but actually nobody wanted to sit at this terrace. We were asked to come up with an idea, how can we actually take this dead space and turn it into something of an urban lounge? And what very few people know is that until the 90s, in the central square of Rotterdam, the Schouwburgplein, there was a paddling pool and a public pool. And this created an incredible vital space in the city. So we explored this idea, is it possible to take this stinky pond and do some harvesting of rainwater with green roofs, filter it through a reed filter, and create 3 swimming pools, a deep pool, a 25-meter pool, and a toddler's pool, to reactivate the space and turn it again into a kind of urban lounge. And this is a lounge and a space that will not only be used in the summer through its new function, but could also function as a skating rink in the winter. One of the projects that maybe demonstrates our circular and inclusive approach the most is the Hakka Recycle office in Rotterdam. It's a huge building, and we were asked to program the ground floor interior with a kind of convention center, auditorium, meeting spaces, small restaurant, and flexible working spaces. And what we did was we analyzed the demolition flows in the city, and we identified 6 demolition buildings that were to be demolished by the municipality in the period that we would be building. And actually, by identifying the materials which would be coming free from this demolition process, we could design an interior. So it's an interior that's basically built using secondhand tile slats, secondhand greenhouses, using doors. It's totally determined by the materials that came free from the demolitions process. But the most interesting aspect of this project is that we actually realized the project with ex-detainees in a reintegration program. That means that we were working with unskilled labor. So what we had to do was come up with very simple details that unskilled people could manage. And that led to a design where there's a lot of repetition. So 3,000 times the same detail creates an auditorium. We doubled this commission with a research commission as well. And we actually monitored all of the movements, all of the electricity that we used, the man hours, the labor costs, and we compared this project to a traditional project. Let's say we were to build the same interior using traditional materials, modern new materials, and a traditional building team. Then what we discovered is that actually roughly we have 70% less CO2 footprint, 70% less labor costs, and 70% less material costs. The only thing that we did not take into account was the time. So it took about 3.5 times longer to realize this project, but a very interesting design and research project for us for future circular projects. The last project that I want to share with you is a project that is to be realized in a couple of places, but it started in Rotterdam. The context of the project is quite interesting. I was talking to the interim director of Kinderdijk, and Kinderdijk, this is an image of it. Probably you all recognize this from the famous Dutch landscape paintings. But we were talking about Rotterdam as a touristic city, as a touristic destination, and how architecture and innovation has actually put Rotterdam on the map as an international destination. And what he said to me was quite interesting. He said, well, what Rotterdam needs is a new kind of sustainable touristic icon. And isn't it possible to combine something like the London Eye with the windmill of the future? And his idea was then to create a river connection between Kinderdijk and the city. So tourists could come to Kinderdijk and see the old windmills of the past, and then go by boat to Rotterdam and see the windmill of the future and be exposed to the culture of the city. So obviously we'd been drinking a little bit by this stage, and yeah, I started to think it's quite an interesting idea. And when I got back to the office, we started to sketch on it. So the basic idea was, well, let's see what happens if you take a kind of a London eye. And what's not so smart about a London eye is that it has a lot of structure, and a lot of money gets spent on making this wheel that's filled of air. What would happen if you were to fill that space with a windmill, the windmill of the future? Then you would be able to generate energy. And if you can generate your own energy, well, then you can also add program. You can maybe live and work and recreate in this building. And if you're located on the right place, then you also have high qualitative project that can also be reached by boat. And that was obviously the link with Kinderdijk. So we made a first kind of image of the project, and this image, we posted it, and it went totally viral. It went around the world. It was published 1,000 times within 6 months in 100 countries. And we started to get calls from countries all over the world, and from companies and research institutes that wanted to work with us. So we built an innovation platform with 33 partners, and we started to develop the project, but based on innovation. So the project evolved in form as we started to work with researchers and with engineers, until it finally got this form, which is the final form for Rotterdam. And basically what you see on the outer ring is the touristic attraction. It's kind of elliptical in shape. It's a rail system, so it's more like a roller coaster on rails than a traditional roller coaster. It's not like the building is static and the cabins are moving over the building. So it's a different concept. And basically you go up to the top and you can get out, and there's a panoramic restaurant and a touristic experience. And then we have the inner ring, which is more the programmatic ring. So in the ground floor, we have commercial space, and in the upper levels, we have offices and residential space. The basic design of the building is based on climate principles. So it's based on the Venturi effect. In the middle, what you see are power beams. Each of these beams has 7 vertical axis windmills, and the whole southern facade is envisaged as a vertical solar park. So basically we're harvesting rainwater, we're harvesting solar energy, and we're harvesting wind energy to create an urban renewable power plant in a sense. What we also did was introduce the principle of modularity. So that's why the building looks like it does. So basically by extending the legs of the building, we can create a building from 100 to 160 meters high, which can be used on different locations. And this is this idea of circular building, which is driven this decision. Perhaps the most interesting part of the building is actually that with all of these companies, we started to explore the idea of building as a service. And I want to just share this short animation before finishing up to explain this idea of building as a service.
In an age of unprecedented innovation, as we move towards a circular and performance economy, we need to radically rethink the way we make buildings. We need to start thinking of buildings as a collection of services. This model is called building as a service. By separating the different layers of the building and breaking them down into components, each individual layer can be viewed as a collection of services. This modular building system, combined with a flexible structure, allows for function-free programming. This means that spaces are fully adaptable over time, and apartments can be converted into a hotel or office or even a school. In this type of building, providers remain owner of their innovation and are therefore tasked to keep them up to date or replace them when needed. The innovations are integrated as modules into the different layers of the building. The structure is constructed with modular bio-based elements, made to maximum transportable sizes and assembled on site. The flexible floor concept makes it possible to integrate living plants and to adapt the installations and even change the position of the bathroom or kitchen to suit future needs. The facade, or smart skin, integrates state-of-the-art facade technologies to regulate privacy, air, temperature, and light, while simultaneously producing sustainable solar energy. It is composed out of internationally recognized standard modules, allowing for upgrades as technologies become more efficient. The interior is built out of modular elements on a 30 by 30 centimeter grid and assembled with dry connections. This enables disassembly and reuse of elements when the spaces change in function. The installations which regulate comfort are connected to the users through smart sensors, enabling spaces to adapt real-time to user needs without the use of commands. This predictive environment is managed by a system of systems, a central brain that enables the individual systems to communicate optimally. The building is a learning ecosystem that processes information collected daily in order to optimize the user experience and the environmental performance of the structure. By closing a performance contract with the building providers, end users are guaranteed an evolving environment in which both the software and hardware are perpetually being upgraded. Because of this, the total cost of ownership can be drastically reduced. This also forces providers to design long-lasting solutions that can easily be replaced and get a second life. Unlike traditional buildings, this system continually evolves to meet the changing needs of its users, setting the new standard for innovative building.
And to finish off, this principle for the Dutch windmill has been captured the fascination of a number of cities, one of which is Oman, where we're looking at local building materials and climatic principles to design a tailor-made solution of this same concept for their location. And the final one, which is quite exciting for us, is Dallas, Texas. It's not Baltimore, but it's closer, let's say. And we're hoping to realize this building in the next couple of years, actually 5 years to be precise. It's coupled with the new high-speed train that's projected between Houston and Dallas. So we're looking at starting the feasibility phase in this year, which would make it very exciting for us to transfer some of these ideas that we have in Holland to USA soil. I'd like to leave it at that. Thank you very much for the attention.
And thank you very much, Dusan, for your presentation. I really enjoyed the storytelling. It was really interesting to follow. And thank you also to Marshall Craft for the first part. Actually, I was thinking something that both of you pointed out, that it's something that I'm also is something that I care for, because I really feel it's a team that is bringing us all together. I mean, Baltimore and Rotterdam are sister city, as you probably all know, and it was really nice to hear a little bit about the history of the city from both perspectives, so we can learn. Personally, I've never been to Baltimore, I didn't really have yet the chance, but it was very nice to get a feeling of comparison. But there's one thing that both of you pointed out very well, is that actually I'm going to quote from Marshall Craft, a city made of immigrants, and that actually applies to both of the cities. In fact, myself, I'm Italian born, and I've been living in 3 different countries, and I, at the moment, call Rotterdam my home. And Dusan as well is also immigrants from South Africa, Paul from South Dakota, and Utku is from Istanbul. So my question would be for you, this idea, or like this experience of going to a different city, a different place, which is like very connecting and giving opportunities, very active, at least that's how I felt when I moved to Rotterdam. What was like suggesting in terms of opportunities, or like what type of energy gave you, like when you got in touch to the city where you're currently based on? And I will start to ask the question to Marshall Craft.
Sure. So I think in the personal experience, it's coming from a city and not as diverse into a city that is extremely diverse and immigrant based. It was it was very eye-opening from just getting to know different cultures in a way, and then taking that cultural notions and somehow incorporating that to an architecture in a simple, basically just the simple daily interactions and whatnot that you have in a city. It just varies from one culture to the other. So understanding that aspect, and then being able to successfully design, that sort of created a diversity of design knowledge for me, just sort of parallel to the diversity of the city versus designing for a typical single sort of not so diverse population, and if that makes sense. Cool.
So Baltimore was very attractive to me because of the types of opportunities that were available here compared to the other places that I lived. I spent time in DC and then in Colorado, and then obviously Florida where I grew up. And Baltimore just had this unique quality about it to really be open to different ways of thinking of things and not having preconceived notions. So it was a much easier place for me to come and explore as a young architect, to really get my, philosophy down pat and really explore on different things. So I had my own firm for many years, was able to do lots of different types of projects and work with lots of different types of people, as opposed to when I was in other locations where it was very specifically focused on specific project types and specific things. And that's what really attracted me to being here, is just the diversity of the people, the cultures, and the attitudes of how you can, explore.
And how about you, Duzan?
For me, what attracted me to Holland was, on the first hand, the Dutch culture. The people here are incredibly open and tolerant of foreigners, which is very welcoming, let's say. And also the unique situation in Rotterdam, I think through the bombing of the city and this architectural oasis that emerged from the ruins, there's an incredibly rich culture of design and a lot of space for innovation. And it's very often that you have clients here who come with the craziest, wildest, innovative ideas. And that's really great as an architect to get that freedom and that space to explore architecture.
Yeah, I saw the last slide of your presentation that you're trying to set foot in US with your project. I'm actually interested in the challenges that this is like presenting, because working overseas, I also had an experience of doing a project in New Jersey from the Netherlands. But if you could ask something to Marshall Crafts, considering their experience, like that based for a longer time on American territory, what do you feel that are like the differences, the challenges, and what kind of advice would you ask them to give to you as a professional stepping foot into the US?
Well, that's a good question. I think maybe it's good to explain how we are really looking at that process, because we actually will take a step back as architects and be more the concept design, let's say, regisseur. What's the English the English word for regisseur? And we will work with local architects who will take the lead, because we realize that it's much too complicated for us as a small Rotterdam-based office to do a project of this scale in the US on US soil. So basically, we will have a supervisory position in the project, and a large local firm will actually take the lead. So that's not really a question. It's more explaining how we are thinking of tackling that. Maybe Paul and Utku can respond to that, if that's a good strategy, or we should really try to get our foot in the door.
That is the best strategy you can probably do. And that's even true from working from city to city here within the US. If we're going beyond our region that we work within, which is within driving distance in a day, if we're further than that, you really have to partner with somebody that's local, that knows that jurisdiction, that knows the rules, that knows the community, that can get out and have that same outreach. And I've done a couple projects in Europe, and it was so frustrating because of the language barriers, as well as just knowing the unique little towns that I was working on, they didn't want anything to do with me at all. So it was always finding the right partner that we could team up with that could, be that local representative. That's just crucial.
And one of the key players in our team is RAvB, who has an office in Amsterdam, but also in New York, and they're familiar with the project. So there's some kind of engineering continuity between the continents. But that's good to hear that this is the good strategy.
It really is the good strategy. Really, it's kudos to you. That's a brave move. I mean, I'm just thinking, putting myself in your shoes, just an architect from Istanbul trying to have a project in the US, and that's a brave move. Knowing what I know right now, so it is. I think you had the right strategy.
And are you planning, Marshall Craft, to, you also mentioned you have some projects in Europe. Are you maybe also thinking of realizing something on this side of the world?
I've done projects in Europe in my previous job when I had my own firm. I did a series of residential projects in Italy and found that to be a very difficult place to try to be accepted. So the projects were completed, but they were completed by local architects, and we did the concept type stuff for the clients that we had here.
Cristina and me are laughing since we have some ties to Italy, yes. And I guess that's also one of the reasons why we live abroad, because we know that frustration.
Yes, we've heard that before. We have done a few different projects in different parts of the world, but that's not one of our key focuses. We do focus on what our clients that we service here, where they want to go and where they want to take us. So we do projects across the US and at times in other locations, but that's not the focus of what we go to look for. It's usually we're taken along for that ride.
Yeah, I understand also from your presentation. I really appreciate the Hartford Crisis Center and how much is really focused to the service and to the local public that is really there. I actually wonder if we still have time, because I think we are running out of it, and I kindly ask Cristina to advise me on this, because I enjoyed the conversation, but I'm afraid that we have also to stop the recording of this.
Please go ahead, Matteo, if you have a last question. Otherwise, I do have one curiosity.
Oh, please, then I'll let you speak.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I would like to ask, well, on both sides, your project were mostly oriented, I know it's not exclusive, but on the Baltimore side, very much about the user. Like you were choreographing really the user and how the experience spaces. Clearly what you show us it has a big impact. So I suppose that you need to pay attention to the user and, and choreograph that part. On the Rotterdam side, you are choreographing the environment a lot. That was the emphasis, right? Our resources. So if you were to give tips to one another on how to, and I'm quite sure you both are experts on both, but if you were to add the component human being to Dusan, to Rotterdam, and if Rotterdam was going to give the component environment to Baltimore, how would you share this information? If this was, for instance, a project you two do together, you two as firms, you two as cities.
Who would you like to address that first?
Go first, Dusan.
Well, I think my office, my partner Elina Strijkers is an interior architect. So what we try to do is we try to actually design from the inside out, and user-centered design is one of our key components. So when I talk about inclusive design, it's not just for social return, but it's also in terms of participation planning, which I think is something that came across very strongly in the presentation of Paul and Utku. Maybe that's a kind of a similarity. I didn't really address it in the presentation because I wanted to bring it to the higher scale, a little bit more to the city scale. But I think that's an overlap possibly in our approaches, the user-centered approach. You want to comment on that, Paul or Utku?
Sure. And I think you're right, Dusan. I mean, regardless of the type of project you do, at least that's how I feel, that the user is the the center of the success. You really need to, the best way to understand the need is to really tap into the user knowledge, user experience. If you want to start out with that, that usually leads you to the right path. So it really is, we do value that initial process of understanding the needs, understanding the users extremely, it's very, very important for us. So, I think it's probably, again, throughout all the project types that you, doesn't matter if it's a behavioral health or you're doing a sustainable project, that's really the key.
Right, the key is really to be very.
Oh, sorry, Paul.
Go ahead, Dusan.
Well, I had a look at your Baltimore sustainability plan, and one of the things that really came out and sprung out was that it's about equity and resilience. So, people and community seems to be very central in your approach to resilience. And I think in Rotterdam and in Holland, because we have this extreme relationship with water, there's a slightly more technical approach to resilience. And I think that's where the two cities maybe can exchange more on and learn from each other. So I think these kinds of exchanges are very valuable in that sense.
I think this is a very good point, because that's something that I think that we're a little bit further behind on, is the climate effects here. And while we are a port city, we do have flooding issues from time to time, and many of our projects have very serious flood restrictions on them. And for many of us, it's hard to understand why those restrictions are in some of these rural areas that we work in, that there's no water nearby, but they put such serious restrictions on them. And I think we take that a little bit for granted. And then from growing up in Florida and being right on the coast where we had, storms constantly, I'm very attuned to that whole thing. But the point that you made also was the community involvement. Going beyond that initial user and blurring the lines between interiors and architecture and sustainable design, we try to blur all those things and meld them all together and bring them all as one, but really interface with the community as a whole. So it's not just the actual end user, but it's a community as a large, really engage them. And I think that was really intriguing with the work that you're doing, and how, it's a broader look. So you took that outward looking look in, and we took the inside looking out, but I think we both do the same thing. We just focused on our presentations in a different way.
Yes, I have to stop you because it's getting very interesting, this conversation, but I'm afraid we really are running out of time. My wish and my lesson that I'm also learning is that when you start to bring individuals and cities together, the exchange, it's always getting super interesting, and it would be really nice to keep going, to asking each other questions and to sharing ideas and inspiring each other to just move further in our profession. But it's a wrap. So thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Cristina, and for organizing this. And yeah.
Matteo, thank you guys, Paul, Utku, Dusan, and Matteo, of course, on behalf of the whole audience and Baltimore Rotterdam Sister Cities Committee and our partners, AIA Baltimore and the Rotterdamse Academie from Bouwkunst. I would like to thank you, and thank you for thank you for maybe having a project that we can all work together in Baltimore, Rotterdam, who knows? And most especially, thank you for making us aware of the concept of architecture as a collaboration, a mental map with complex relationship, the most importantly being the user, the human being, and of course the environment, and conscious about our reducing resources. And I will stop it right there because I know otherwise we're going to get into politics. Audience, please note that you can revise and revisit this session through the YouTube channel following the Baltimore Rotterdam Sister City YouTube channel, and you will receive an email if you have subscribed for this lecture, informing you when the recording is up. Please also remember that if you are an AIA member, you can fill out the form for your 1LU credits. Again, thank you very much. And I really sincerely hope that you are going to welcome Steve Ziger from Ziger Sneed and Jan Knicker from MVRDV, moderated by Sinisha Knbrar from the University of Quebec, Montreal, next week, Tuesday, the 22nd of March. Again, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, guys, and well, have a nice evening or afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.